Welcome to VR Roundtable, episode 25. My name's Gary, and joining me this week is Anthony from Sacramento and also Steve from Louisville, Kentucky. And you're probably wondering why Gary is hosting this week, but we thought we'd mix things up a little bit. Anthony's got a bit of a sore throat, and we just wanted to change things around anyway. So I'll be the host this week, and this could be catastrophic. We don't know how it's going to go, but we're going to run with it anyway. So, but yeah, so let's head over to Anthony. Anthony, how's it going over in Sacramento? How are the floodwaters?
Yeah, the flood update 2017, it basically no change. The river is incredibly high, but we haven't had much rain, so that's been good. And don't have any new movies to report on or anything like that, so no controversy there.
No, I've not really been watching too much either on that front, but there's some coming out. I want to go and see the new Kong movie with my son, so that might be the next one I go and see at the cinema. Anyway, Steve, how are you?
I'm good. Been a busy week. I haven't had a chance to play hardly any games that much. So it's the weekend now, so I'm hoping that changes and I can close the week out in a little more fun note. But otherwise, I'm doing good.
Okay, that's good. Well, we've got a busy show this week. There's been a lot of news stories coming out because of GDC. So we're going to go through them. We've got a big list of news stories that we're trying to cover in this show, but we might not get through them all. So we'll just cover the big ones, and we'll see how far we can get down this list before we've been going on for too long. So let's get straight into the first one. And this one is probably, I mean, in my opinion, without a doubt, the biggest news story of the week, and that is the Oculus have announced a price reduction on the Rift and the Touch. So the bundle is now $200 cheaper. That's for the Rift and the Touch bundle. Each individual item, the Rift has been reduced by $100, and also the Touch has been reduced by $100. So now you can pick up a Touch. If you've already got a Rift, you can pick up a Touch for $99. They're making it a lot easier to make that decision if that's something you want to do. So yeah, I think it's a great bit of news, and let's head over to Steve. Steve, what are your thoughts on this one?
I love the piece of news. Like, I think Oculus, I don't know, like these last few decisions they've made, like have like really impressed me. Like, I think they're doing some of the right stuff. Unfortunately, I think it may be too little too late. But regardless, like they're doing a good thing. Getting this price down is huge. I don't think it made me feel like when I first read the news, just, you know, I'll just kind of lay it out like that. Like, I was like, oh crap, like I might go buy a Rift now. And really I started thinking about it. I'm like, no, I don't have anything to really gain myself from picking up a Rift, since there's such kind of cross ability to play the games. But if I wasn't in VR, I think if I was in the market to get either the Rift or the Vive, I think the Rift would be winning out, even though I know the tracking is superior. You have the better controllers. You have a lot of, you know, and money rules. I mean, $200 is $200. That goes a long way. So I think it's very good, and I'll be very interested to see if they are able to kind of cut into some of the market share that the Vive has, to see if the gap closes any. Granted, we don't always get really good numbers and all that, but again, in summary, I think this was a really good move by Oculus.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the fact for people, if you like you say, if you're not in VR at the moment and you're looking at the two main headsets, you know, PC based headsets at least, you'd be thinking, if you were undecided of which one to go for, this would absolutely push you over to the Rift. In my opinion, this is absolutely made up your mind. So I think it's great, and I think a lot more people are going to be getting Rifts because of this. But HTC said that they don't see the need to cut the price of the Vive at the moment. Anthony, what do you think of all this?
Well, I was at work and I was just doing my work, and then I had a little break, like a little 15-minute break, and I hopped onto Reddit and I saw this news and I was like, oh shit, wow, this caught me by surprise. And when I first saw it, I kind of had the same reaction Steve did. I was like, should I buy an Oculus Rift? I mean, I actually thought that for a second. And but like Steve, I kind of thought about it more, and I was kind of like, well, you know, why would I buy a Rift? I mean, there are some advantages to buying a Rift from the standpoint of just, you know, the controls. I mean, yeah, we can play most of the Oculus games and it seems to work okay, but there's always the translating of the controls that are, it's a little bit weird. And, you know, you're running things through Revive and you always wonder how much of an effect is that having on the whole thing. But, you know, when I think about this price drop, one of the things that does come to mind for me is that if you remember way back to before the Oculus Rift was even released, they were talking about, Palmer Luckey was talking about how they were going to try to sell this thing at cost. And when we first got the announcement of the Oculus Rift price, if you guys can remember all the way back then, I don't know, was that like February 2016 or something like that? When they first announced that price, I remember everybody thinking, whoa, that's like a couple $100 higher than we thought it was going to be, because you're selling these dev kits for, you know, whatever price they were selling the dev kits at. And then the consumer version 1, CV1, bam, the price was like $200 higher than a lot of people thought. One thing I think with this thing is that back when they decided to first launch the Rift and they decided on that price and all of that, I think originally they were going to try to just like not make anything off of it, sell it at cost, try to keep it as low as possible. But I think they kind of changed their mind and they thought, look, we probably have like 100,000, 200,000 early adopters that are going to buy it at almost whatever price we put it out there at, within reason. And you can never raise the price. You can only lower the price. And so they knew, they probably had this strategy all along. The price dropped March 1st, bam, price drop. So this could be a strategy that they had, long time strategy. And it's like, okay, we'll start a little bit higher, then we'll come down. And so they could be selling this stuff now mostly at cost. And this may have been their strategy all along, but it does put pressure on HTC. I know HTC said, look, we're not going to react to this. We're not lowering the price. They're going to have to do something. They're going to have to improve the package or something. They're going to have some reaction, but the reaction, they probably got caught off guard. And so they're not going to have an immediate, like a knee-jerk reaction to it. They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do. But I'm pretty sure there will be some type of price reduction, or maybe they put in the deluxe audio headset. They throw in one of those trackers. Who knows, you know?
Yeah, I think they have to, and I'm actually surprised they came out and said that. You know, they may have been better served saying no comment or something like that, because, you know, and this may segue into our next topic, but between the news of the Oculus Rift getting this big price cut, and then LG coming out and kind of one up in the Vive with their new headset, even though it's just a prototype, it kind of backs HTC in a corner, in my opinion. And for them to say, well, we don't see a need. Now we don't know when this LG is coming out. We don't know what the final specs are. But if I'm a consumer and I'm saying, okay, I'm interested in PSVR this year, maybe I'm gonna get my tax return, maybe you know, I'm going to come into some money, or I've been saving and now I got enough. I'm like, okay, the Oculus Rift's $200 cheaper. The Vive, yeah, it has the better tracking system. The lighthouses are awesome. But now there's this other thing. And if it comes out in 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, and it kind of one-ups, it's not complete revolutionary. It's not, you know, what we'd hope out of the Vive 2, but it is a little bit better resolution. It is a lot of things. And I'm not going to steal the whole thunder from announcing it from Gary. He's the host. But I'm just saying, like, to kind of tie it all together, like HTC, like, I think they've got to do something. And I don't think they made the right comment.
No, with regards to the price reduction of the Oculus Rift as well, you know, some people were saying how this is sort of a reaction due to the fact that ZeniMax have won this court case against them, and they're trying to reduce profits per unit of the Oculus just to make it look like they're not making so much money, and they might not have to pay ZeniMax so much. And this could be all part of the appeals process. But I don't know if that would be the case. I think they've had this in mind for quite a while. And like Anthony says, it could be the case that they have had this in mind from the very beginning, go in at a high price and now bring it down. And it seems like, I mean, this is a big cost reduction when you think about it. $200. I mean, what you've got to consider on top of this is to get room scale, you've got to add the cost of an extra sensor. You really need 3 sensors in order to bring it up to full room scale as well.
But they lowered the price on those too.
Did they?
It was like $25 or something.
Oh,
I think
really?
the sensors were 79 and now they're 59. So yeah, they're doing it across the board. And they just need to lower. They need to lower the price of their software now.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to mention before we move on to the next story as well, the final thing I want to say about this is, say what you like about Oculus, they've had an absolutely fantastic week this week. They've been announcing so many new titles that are coming out over the next few months. They've got 1 title per month being released, big titles as well. These are sort of as close as we're going to get to AAA titles on VR at the moment. So, you know, we've already spoken about Arctica 1. This was our most anticipated game of 2017 when we did that show a few months ago. And Arctica 1 looks fantastic. Did any of you guys see any of these other game announcements at all? And did any stand out to you, Anthony?
You know, speaking of Arctica 1, Upload VR had a little story about Arctica 1, and they talked about the graphics of it. They showed, there was some video of it and stuff like that. And I mean, the big question with Arctica 1, though, is it does appear that there seems to be these teleporting locations that you kind of shift from one location to another, and then you're basically stapled to the ground in that spot, and then you shift to another spot. That's super disappointing, but if that's what they have to do to get the visual fidelity looking at, I mean, maybe that's kind of a trick that they're using to make the visual fidelity so good, where if they just gave you free reign movement to go anywhere, it would cause problems for, you know, the current level of graphics cards and stuff like that. So it might be some type of little thing that they're doing. I'm guessing that's what they must be doing, because we know now people can deal with regular locomotion. People can deal with regular trackpad locomotion and teleporting and stuff like that. So for them to set it up that way, it makes me think that they're using that in a certain way to give them the visual fidelity they want, because they know you're kind of stuck in one spot. But that looked great. I didn't really wasn't there one that was like some kind of role-playing game, like a mage something or something?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that. I was trying to think of it while you were talking, but yeah, it's like a mage game. That looked pretty cool.
Yeah, and going back to the price drop, I'm always wondering, like, why is there not a bundle? Why doesn't Oculus have why do you have to buy Touch and the Rift separate? Why don't they just have one box, and it just, like, maybe they could even trim $50 more off of it as well if they just put everything in one box.
Yeah.
Anybody have any?
I think that might be coming. There was an interview with the guy from Oculus, I can't remember his name, but Tested interviewed him at GDC, and they actually asked him that question: why is it not being bundled in one box? And he was saying, at the moment it's not the right time, because we've got units out there of the Rift already on its own, so we still need to keep these two things separate, but that will probably be coming in the future. And I think that's really what they need to do. They need to do this as one bundle and say it's an all-inclusive, it's a VR system. You know, that's how the Vive was marketed. It was marketed as a VR system rather than just a VR HMD.
I wonder if they'll kick the Microsoft controller to the curb when they do the combined bundle. But no, they probably won't. But
no. Steve, did you see any of these game titles at all? And is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I don't remember seeing much in terms of software announcements. If they were buried in the headlines of all the big news. So yeah. I have nothing to add.
No, there was a lot there. But yeah, so moving on to the next news story is the LG announcement of a SteamVR HMD. This is one which is very similar specs-wise to the HMDs that we've got already, but it's got a slightly higher resolution. Now that it's got a 2-panel display, each panel has 1440 by 1280 resolution, and that's compared to the Vive and Rift resolution of 1080 by 1200. So it has got a higher resolution display on there. It's the displays are actually made by LG themselves, so they're an OLED display. 90 hertz refresh rate, same as the Rift and the Vive, and 110-degree field of view, which is approximately the same as the Rift and the Vive as well. But it did have this added thing of this flip up visor, basically, so you can just flip this thing up, and we've seen this on a few headsets that are coming out in the future. So I thought that was a good little addition, and they also said that this will be releasing at a similar price to current gen VR hardware. So let's go over to Anthony on this one. Did you see this announcement from LG?
Yeah, and I saw the tested video, and I think Upload had a video as well, and it appears that the biggest thing that this new headset is doing really is the comfort factor, because they showed it off a bunch of different times that once you put this thing on, you have this band that kind of goes across your forehead, and it's kind of it's holding it here, and then it's also holding it at the base of like the back part of your skull. And so it's basically locking it in there. And then once you have it locked in like that, you can pop the thing out and you can flip it up. And so I really think this is a pretty big deal, because how many times have we been having our headset on, and then you realize, oh, my sound isn't working. I got to go over to my computer. I got to disable something. You know, there's always little things that pop up. And then what I do is with my HTC Vive, I just kind of put it up here, but it's kind of, you know, it starts falling down, and it's not an elegant situation like it is with, you know, PlayStation VR. You hit that button, you can kind of slide it out, but you can't do this up and away. And that is actually really cool. The tested video also, they were saying that just on a pure comfort level, the comfort seems to be better. There's also the field of view. Some people are talking about how the field of view on this might be a little bit bigger than the Vive is, from the standpoint of, I think they were saying something about if you have the screen 12 millimeters away from your eyes, the field of view is 110 degrees. And I know that the Vive has 110 degrees as well, but I think the screen has to be closer to your eye to be able to hit that point. I don't know if we'll be able to do any kind of gasket mod or anything to get that even closer, because, you know, 12 millimeters, I can tell you with my Vive, my eyeballs are like 3 millimeters away from the screen, because I'm using this field of view mod to get it even closer, so I'm up in there more, and the sweet spot is better, and I'm really in there, and I'm getting that extra field of view. I don't know if you'll be able to do that with this headset. Another thing too is that the resolution of the panels seems to be a little bit in flux, and they're not using Fresnel lenses right now. Well, actually, they have two different versions. They have one version with Fresnel lenses, and then they have one version with their refractive lenses or something like that. And so they have two different versions, and they're not sure yet what they're going to do. And they're trying to get feedback from people to decide, are we going to go with the Fresnel ones, or are we going to go with these refractive ones? There's some trade-offs there. And it's really interesting, but it kind of sounds to me like, I don't know if this thing is going to come out this year. Do you guys really think this thing is going to actually release in 2017?
I think it's because this was a prototype, and I think it's not really due to come out this year. I think it's next year that they're aiming for. So this is something that ways down the line. But yeah, Steve, was there anything that stood out to you about this?
Well, to answer that first question, I'm not sure it won't come out this year. For a prototype, it looked pretty damn finished and good, so it wouldn't shock me that this thing comes out this year. I think it'd be later. I saw the same tested video that you did, I think, Anthony, and maybe you saw it as well, Gary. And the guy that the guys from the LG staff that the guys from Tested were talking to, he seemed to, like, you know, have his talking points and things that he couldn't say. And I think the way he was responding, it almost made it sound like LG was really uncertain about a lot of things. And I'm almost curious if they are probably more certain and are just, you know, not trying to put too much information out there, give them a little room to wiggle if they need it. But at some point in one of our last shows, I had said that, you know, if I could take the best of the PlayStation VR and the best of the Vive and kind of put them into one headset, that I would absolutely love it. And I think this LG has done it. It's a little bit better resolution, but they, as far as I can see, they really borrowed from Sony on the part that kind of rests on your forehead, the halo. But then they one up Sony, you know, where after you kind of slide it away from your nose, being able to tilt it up. And I think that's huge for the reasons Anthony mentioned, and also like the person from LG mentioned that, you know, a lot of developers, you know, they're constantly going in and out, and this will be certainly much easier for them. So if it comes out, say, this year, and if we don't have a lot of concrete awareness on a Vive 2 or a Rift 2 or, you know, someone else's offering that's going to have really integrated wireless and you know, much better resolution, I think I would be tempted at looking at this LG, assuming it's priced well, and saying, okay, how much can I get selling my Vive? What is my upgrade cost to transition? Because if I could pull that off for $200, especially since I'm considering the $100 deluxe audio strap on my Vive, I could see myself doing it for sure.
Yeah. The other thing with this as well, I don't know if any of you read the Upload VR hands-on article about this headset. One thing that struck me about the HMD after reading that, the guy that was doing this was saying that to him it was very comparable to the Vive. It was pretty much because he was talking about the resolution and saying that he didn't really notice a big difference between the two resolutions or anything, and also the field of view was pretty much the same. There was nothing seemed to stand out to him overall, and I'm just wondering if it's really going to be a big improvement or enough of an improvement over the Vive to justify that $200. Anthony, you mentioned the Fresnel lenses, and I didn't know that fact. I didn't know it wasn't using the Fresnel lenses, but they are the big obstacle for me at the moment with the Vive. But yeah,
you know, another thing too is that coming out of this headset is a wire that is really thin. It's a USB-C wire, and it's very short. And a lot of the people were like, you know, this wire is really short. And apparently they're currently working on like a battery pack and a wireless box that would sit at your belt. And so the wire just goes to that. And so this could be straight up wireless. This is another reason why I'm kind of wondering, are they really going to be able to get this thing out in 2017? Because they're still, you know, they have one with Fresnel lenses and they have one without. And then also I think this prototype is just using one panel. And I think they're going to be switching to 2 individual panels for the better IPD adjustment. Although I might be mixing that up with something else, but I think the details are a little.
Yeah, I think this one is using 2 panels. That's from all the reports.
That's how I understand it that way as well, that it's using 2 panels. And the 1440 is that it's an increase in, I believe, vertical. So the panels are kind of positioned vertically and not so much wide. And that may aid in some of that IPD adjustment. I thought that was an interesting standpoint, because as soon as I saw the 1440 by 1280, I just assumed the 1280 was the vertical resolution and the 1440 was a horizontal, you know, because the way we see what, roughly twice as wide as we do tall. And when I specifically heard them say no, it's kind of oriented the other way. The 1440 is the vertical resolution and the 1280 is the horizontal. I just thought that was interesting.
You know, another thing too is like the lighthouses. We didn't get confirmation whether they're the new lighthouse design or the previous lighthouse design. What we did get is that LG is manufacturing these lighthouses, but they're manufacturing off of the Valve design, but I don't know if it's the new one or if it's the previous one. And then the controllers, they call it the Viper design or something. The controllers look really kind of weird to me. The buttons they have the system button, and then they added one extra button, and then the grip buttons are like really low down on the controller compared to the Vive. I don't know if this controller, see, it's the thing is like Steve was saying, should I sell my Vive and maybe buy this? Maybe it will be like a $200 difference. Is it worth it to upgrade? And I would say if it came with the new lighthouses, and especially if it came with the Knuckles controllers, absolutely. But with these Viper controllers, I don't know that these controllers are an upgrade in any way, shape, or form. I'm kind of wondering about the button placement, to be honest, and the way the buttons looked a little cheesy to me. But I don't know. What did you guys think about like the controller lighthouse situation?
I think the lighthouse, I'm less concerned. Like, I'm happy with the existing lighthouses. If they make them smaller and more energy efficient, okay. I don't know what there is to gain from a performance perspective, because mine seem to be rock steady. I don't know if other
supposedly the what do you call it? The
field of view is a bit wider.
The field of view is wider.
Oh, okay. Well, oh, okay. Yeah, I remember seeing that now. So you could like put it, instead of in a corner, you could put it on a sidewall. So it gave you more placement options, which currently isn't an issue for me. I think maybe for you, Gary, that'd be a big deal.
Well, just on that point, I was thinking about this because I'm the same as you, Steve. You know, that I don't think I would upgrade the lighthouse if they brought one out, because I'm perfectly happy with what I'm getting at the moment. So I don't see any real need to do that.
The controllers, though, like I didn't love the look of them. I'm not convinced it'll be, you know, a downgrade, maybe a side grade. You know, again, so and I'm just pulling a number straight out of my rear end. I don't know if this would be a $200 transition cost, but if it was, like, I really think the headset in the end is going to be, based on what we've seen, is going to be a notable improvement. You know, it's not necessarily revolutionary. It's not like, whoa, like, you know, the resolution has tripled and there's absolutely zero lens distortion of any kind. You know, these 5 and 10 minute test scenarios on a show floor and not in your home where you've used your Vive for hundreds of hours or whatever. I don't necessarily take what the guys that tested say from their quick and brief impressions. If I look at what this headset is specified and what has been described with the refractive lenses, which I think are going to be an improvement over the Fresnel, the increased resolution, the change from OLED to from pentile to OLED, that alone should make it look different. And I think that after people get more time with it, you will hear more commentary of how this is a meaningful improvement, not a revolutionary step. This isn't Vive 2.0, but this is seems like a very solid Vive 1.5. And, you know, depending on what HTC is doing with the Vive 2, if it's way out, this could be worth, you know, it's a transition cost, at least for me, because I'm really, really bugged by the Fresnel lenses. You see me wearing glasses. I'm very sensitive to halo effects, like at night driving with headlights. So I think the glare from the Fresnel lenses probably more exacerbated for me than the average person. So I could see myself jumping on this. I'm very, very, very interested.
Yeah, for me, the Fresnel lenses, and also Anthony mentioned wireless. I mean, if this could be just come out as standard with wireless, then that'd be great as well. And that would definitely make me consider this HMD as a worthwhile upgrade. Okay, let's move on to the next story. And I think, Anthony, you've got this one.
Yeah, so one thing that came out during this week that I think has not gotten anywhere near the amount of attention that it really should get is Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox. He visited the studio for Podcast Unlocked, which is an IGN podcast, and he came on the podcast. There's a video version of this. There's an audio version of this. I highly recommend anybody that's really interested in VR to go check this out. And I believe that when he starts talking about VR, it starts at about the 20-minute mark of this podcast. And he only talks about it for maybe 5 or 6 minutes. And everything that he says is very cryptic, but there are some key things that he says. And there are some things that he says that I was like, whoa, this is weird. And so, basically, it's like, what is Microsoft thinking about VR? Microsoft is a huge company. I mean, they're a huge part of this industry. We think of Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, and then, of course, we add the PC stuff as well. We have PlayStation VR, and it's a major product, and Xbox has not answered this product. We know that Scorpio is supposedly coming in November of this year. And we know that, well, our next story is going to be this Acer headset, which is there's going to be other ones as well. That's supposed to come around November of this year. So I think it would be reasonable to assume that, oh, if I go buy a Scorpio in November, and if I get one of these other headsets in November, I can play a VR game on my Scorpio in November and in December. It's not going to happen, okay? It's not going to happen according to what Phil Spencer said. And I'm going to read off a couple of quotes that he said during this interview. Okay, so he says, honestly, I still see VR as an area for innovation and growth. And I'll say it again, I think Windows is the right place for that to happen. And then a little bit later, he says, because I just see the work that goes on the Windows platform, and I think it's the right place for the early incubation. We're still figuring out what the canvas is for VR development. What are the nouns and verbs that work? We know this in 2D. We know how it works with a controller. VR, and it's not a slam at any one of the individual platforms. It's just a new creative process. And then a little later, he says, so I think it will be important to what we're doing on Xbox and Scorpio. But right now, I'm still, how can I get hundreds of millions of VR sockets out there for developers to develop against? And I see the easiest way to do that is to focus on Windows. I think VR and Scorpio is important. It's really more about when, not if. Before you bring something to console, I think it's important that it's had time to kind of find where its creative energy comes from. Okay, so I hear all of that and I'm like, what? It doesn't sound like anybody is going to be playing VR and Scorpio anytime soon. So everybody that was hoping that maybe at the E3 show, you know how Microsoft moved it to Sunday. Some people thought, oh, this is because of VR. They're going to be talking about a lot of VR stuff. They need time for all this stuff to settle out. They might not say hardly a peep about VR because it sounds like from Microsoft's standpoint, yeah, VR may eventually come to Scorpio, but it does not seem to be in the near term whatsoever. And I think this should be the headline. This is the biggest news story of all of them. This is bigger than the Oculus price drop, in my opinion, because Microsoft is a major, major factor in the video game industry, and their take on VR is that matters. This matters for the whole ecosystem. And I don't know what to make of these comments, man. I'm kind of bewildered by this whole thing. But Gary, I mean, back to you or Steve. I don't know who wants to comment on it.
Yeah, I can comment quickly because I listened to this podcast as well. You recommended me to it, and I thought I'd listen to this interview. And within all these quotes, what you got to remember as well is he was being asked specific and pointed questions as to whether Scorpio will be having VR in the near future or whether it will be coming later on. And he did say, it's a matter of VR will come to the Scorpio, but it's a matter of when, not if. And a lot of what they were asking, as I say, they were very pointed questions. I was under the impression he was being very clever about it, but he was deflecting a lot of this away for the moment. And I don't really know if he's entirely sure how they're going to attack this VR with Scorpio at the moment. Because what you got to remember is, as well, with the PlayStation VR, this has been developed over sort of the course of 6 years, really, from the initial idea of it. Microsoft have not really, to the best of our knowledge, have not really been researching or considering VR for the console market anywhere close to that length of time. I mean, again, as far as we know. So in my mind, I feel like they're playing catch up a little bit in this, and he doesn't want to deter people by saying VR is 2 years away for the Scorpio. I think the way they're going to do this, and from what I understand, they've said that the Scorpio is going to be compatible with Windows holographic. I think they're going to be doing this in small steps where they're going to implement it into the Scorpio more or less in like the operating system level. So it will run, because it runs Windows 10, so they can implement it in like the Windows holographic mixed reality type thing. I don't know exactly how that will work, but further down the line, maybe they'll integrate it into actual VR games, because they've got a lot. It takes a long time to make a VR game, so it could be coming a bit later on.
Gary, what about this comment that he made though, where he's talking about, but right now how can I get hundreds of millions of VR sockets out there? Hundreds of millions?
Yeah,
that's like 10 years away. What are you talking about? What the hell is Phil Spencer talking about? Honestly, I think this is a huge story in the VR world, and no one's really making a big deal out of it. I'm making a big deal out of it because I think this is big. One thing I will say though is, I mean, I can ring the panic alarm and say, oh my God, Microsoft must not really be into VR because they're not bringing it to Scorpio. So they're not trying to answer PlayStation VR in any way. They're not going to be talking about it much at E3 because they don't, I mean, I don't know, but I will say on the positive side, he did mention controllers. He did mention nausea and sickness and stuff. And so I think what you're saying, Gary, about how, well, Sony's been working on this for 6 or 7 years. And it takes time to figure this stuff out. Microsoft in the beginning, they were all about HoloLens. Everybody was talking VR, and they were kind of like, we're not really going down the VR road. We think, they didn't think people wanted to be isolated and stuff like that. But it's possible. They have no idea what kind of controllers they're going to use for this thing. They don't have any idea of like the nausea situation, and then also how they're going to develop their games and stuff. Sure, they can make a platform and have it available, and then Super Hypercube and Res Infinite and stuff, they could port those games over to Scorpio. I'm sure that would not be a problem. But maybe Microsoft internally, they don't know, how are we going to put Halo in VR? How are we going to do this in VR? How are we going to do that? They might not have figured any of that out, and they might have been thinking much more HoloLens. And now it's like, damn, do we flip the script and now do we go VR? Or it almost sounds to me like they don't know what to do here. And so they're like, we don't really know what to do. So you know what? Let's just put it on Windows and we'll let everybody figure it out on Windows. And then once we have it kind of figured out on Windows, then we bring that to Scorpio. But the thing I want to caution people is, I don't know that you're going to play a VR game on Scorpio until late 2018. Okay. So anybody that thinks they're going to play a VR game on Scorpio before, say, summer of 2018, I think you're going to be mistaken. I don't think it's going to happen. We're going to learn more at E3, but this is a huge story that is not, nobody is talking about this. This is the biggest story this week, in my personal opinion. Now, I know, Steve, I know you didn't really hear anything about this, but now you heard me yap about it for 10 minutes. What's your take, Steve?
No, I heard about it. I just didn't listen to the podcast that you referenced, the podcast Unlocked, I think there was. So, my opinion is that Microsoft isn't necessarily a very innovative company. They're more of a reactive company, and that's okay. That's not a slam against them. They've, in the gaming space, they have attempted to be innovative, like with the Kinect, and that didn't really get them anywhere. And they're not really a very strong hardware company either. In making a console, they're able to farm a lot of that out, so to speak, to AMD and to a lot of other companies that really know how to make computing devices. And then Microsoft puts their OS on it. So when it comes to to compare them to, say, Sony, have been making digital cameras and video cameras and TVs, and they have all of this consumer electronics kind of framework and decades of experience to pull from. So in my opinion, it is easier for Sony to say, let's go do VR, than it is for Microsoft to do that. that coupled, so you just kind of couple that framework, and then you add to the fact that Microsoft, going back say 2 years or whenever, they weren't sure. They kind of took Apple's position and said, well, we're gonna pause on VR. We're not going to jump into it. We're just going to watch and see how it goes. So now they're kind of, in my opinion, doubly behind in comparisons to Sony. What I expect them to do is I really expect them to kind of open, try to create a software advantage and really just farm out some hardware. I mean, they're already kind of doing it with the holographic and the Acer and all the other headsets. They can probably find a way to take something that's already hardware-wise under development and make it work. What they got to figure out though is how is it going to plug into the console. I mean, they've already taken with the Xbox One, they've already kind of lopped off the Kinect, and so they got to get some sort of sensing technology. I think that's probably the big missing piece. They got the box and it's got computational power. They've got VR hardware that they could acquire / contract and make compatible there. They can do their own software. They're a very good software and services company. So what's missing is tracking.
Okay, but so here's the thing though. Like this November, the Scorpio is going to release. Yes or no?
Well, sure.
Yes, right? Yeah. Scorpio's coming out this November. And are we going to end up in another situation like with Sony where you have a little processor box and you got all these little cables going everywhere? They should have this figured out. Now, we go back to that E3 show last year when they had that big video about Scorpio. Todd Howard was on the screen. He's talking about Fallout 4 VR. Well, something weird is going on here, okay? Because also, this is kind of a side note, but Alex Kipman, he's kind of the guy that was the head of like HoloLens and all that. He also made a comment about Scorpio and VR, and very specifically in his comment, he said something about VR games 2018, and it was very specific. And Phil Spencer as well, there was another comment he made where he said something about 2018. They're being very deliberate about that. I just feel like they've had a full year. A year ago, they were talking about Fallout 4 with Todd Howard. They should have figured out what kind of controller are we going to have? What kind of tracking method are we going to have? Maybe have some of that stuff built into the Scorpio so we don't have all these different little wires and boxes all over the place. That
was the point I was trying to make. They didn't pull the trigger, and I think a year is not enough time for them. You got to understand that they're not as innovative. They're not as reactive in a hardware market as Sony and Samsung and LG and all these other companies that have decades more experience making hardware. Hardware is not Microsoft's bag. So like if you put everybody back on the start line, in like a track and field race, and you fire the gun and say go, when it comes to hardware development, Microsoft isn't going to really be competitive. It just takes them longer. That's not their history as a company. So it's twofold, of why I think and why you think they're behind. One fold is they just didn't pull the trigger. When Sony and HTC and Oculus were all pulling the trigger. And two, even if they had pulled that trigger, they're just not as reactive from a hardware perspective. That's been their MO for a long time. And again, that's okay. Apple, is a little bit better at hardware, but they do the same thing. They kind of wait back in the bushes and they go, okay, this is what everybody's made. Now we're going to jump into this game and we're going to figure out a way to do it better, or try. They in Apple has said, hey, we're focused on AR. So I think we're saying the same thing. I think there's different reasons as to why. I'm not as convinced that it's the biggest headline, because I don't know, maybe it may be me personally, but I think I wasn't expecting Microsoft to do much. I think they kind of already set this framework and have been saying this kind of stuff for a while. It's just they really consolidated and made the same statement a little bit louder. They have not given any hints that they are close on VR.
Yeah. Well, some of the comments that Phil Spencer was making during that podcast as well. He did specifically mention VR for the Scorpio, but he was always also talking about how he was mainly interested in AR and where that's going to go, and that would fall in line with the Windows holographic, the HoloLens kind of thing as well. But it's difficult, and it's an interesting thing to discuss because we don't know what Microsoft are doing. They appear to not have any definitive path towards getting VR on the Scorpio at the moment, even if they're going to use these HMDs, these third-party HMDs, and we'll move on to that in just a second. But they're going to have a problem because they're using this inside-out tracking. Okay, now you then have a problem of needing motion controllers, which are going to work with these games. If they're not going down the motion controller route, they're not going down the room scale route, then they'll be using gamepad. So they're limiting VR to a gamepad, which, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I just find it difficult to know a clear path of where they're going with this, and they're not giving anything away at the moment. So,
and you also, like, Microsoft has always been very kind of Trojan horse. You know, the Xbox has always been something that they've tried to utilize as a Trojan horse for the bigger picture for them. Like, no matter how big Xbox is in the realm of gaming, that's still a small slice of their overall picture. And they, you know, the Xbox One, they did it. You know, they were trying to, going all the way back to, what's that box, back when people were first getting computers and internet, they had their little internet box, like Web TV or something. Like, Microsoft has always tried to Trojan horse their way into their primary service. And, you know, this is exciting for gaming. Let me kind of put it this way. Like, if you go back a generation or two, you know, you had, in my opinion, at least in terms of like direction, you had a lot more parity. You know, Xbox, PS2, Nintendo, GameCube, like everything was, they all kind of seemed to have the same goal. We want to make a console and we want to sell you software, and that's really it. There wasn't much else to the story. Now, fast forward to now, you have Microsoft over here with the Xbox, and they really push their services and their industry, and no VR. Sony is kind of, you know, one-upped them, at least in this generation, because they had the, you know, the more preferred hardware, but they've also gone down this VR route. Nintendo's out in right field, like, Nintendo, I was like, you know, we'll just leave it at that. Nintendo's being really Nintendo-y. And then Steam, you know, is kind of coming to the picture. So now I think it's exciting because you got all these major players going in different directions. So much to VR, you know, not everybody's playing in that space, and I think it's okay.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next story, because this is very closely related with what we've just been discussing. We've probably touched on quite a few points of this, but this was the announcement as well at GDC that Microsoft will be launching consumer versions of their VR headsets, which are being manufactured by sort of third parties, Acer, and some of the others as well. And these will be released in during the holiday season, they said. So that could be anywhere between sort of October towards the end of the year. And Acer was the one that was sort of being shown off at GDC. Well, actually, the dev kits of the Acer VR headset are being sent out for people to start developing for Windows mixed reality. So Acer's HMD, it has a resolution of 1440 by 1440. I don't know if that's per screen, actually. I didn't see that. I would imagine it is, but that's quite a high resolution as well compared to some of the other headsets. But there was also all of these headsets for Microsoft Windows holographic. They feature inside-out tracking. And this was something that was interesting to me because they're sort of transported some of the technology from HoloLens, because that uses inside-out tracking as well. They've used some of that technology in these headsets, and I've always wondered how well this technology will work. Presumably it works well in HoloLens, but in these more budget HMDs, I don't know how well it works. But on Upload VR, they did have a hands-on with this as well, and they reported that the inside-out tracking of these headsets works very, very well. And that was sort of reassuring to me for the future, because I think this is the way it will be going in the future. Yeah, with these sort of launching all these VR headsets later on this year, Anthony, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, one of the things that stood out to me about this is that in every little article that you read about these headsets, they don't really say VR very much. Like Microsoft, it's mixed reality, it's Windows holographic. And the funny thing about this is I was on the PSVR subreddit, and there was a thread on there about this headset, and they were talking about Scorpio and stuff. And every single person in this thread thought that this was an AR headset. They didn't even realize it was VR. They read the story and they saw this like mixed reality, Windows holographic, and I'm telling you, there was like 40 responses in this thread, and like 95% of them were saying, I don't think AR is that big of a deal anyway. I'm not really into AR. I don't think AR is going to be that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. Everybody was talking about AR. I'm like, hello, do you guys realize this is a freaking VR headset? Okay, this is not an AR headset. Yes, it does have two little cameras on the side, and they are going to add mixed reality stuff to it, and that is a bonus. It's kind of like a little bit like Project Alloy with Intel and all of that. And so what Microsoft is doing here, really what they're doing is you have Steam and you have Oculus, and Microsoft is trying to create a third pillar to this where, okay, everybody's going to go to SteamVR and they're going to make SteamVR type stuff. Or they might go to Oculus and they make Oculus type stuff. Microsoft needs a third option. They need a third option where they're the runners of the show, where they have their store, their Windows 10 store. And that's what this is all about. So they gave away their HoloLens technology to like 7 different companies. Yeah, we see this Acer one, but there's a Lenovo headset. There's a Asus headset. There's Hewlett Packard. Dell, this Acer just happens to be one of many. Okay, yeah, they're going to have dev kits for this Acer one later this month, but we still have Dell, we still have Hewlett Packard. Personally, I thought the looks of the Hewlett Packard headset was the coolest looking one of the bunch. But all of these are supposed to come out in this November, and again, going back to the Phil Spencer story, the focus is Windows, and it's Windows holographic. And the idea is they want to build their apps so that it runs on every level of these headsets, and it also runs on HoloLens as well. And then anything that runs on HoloLens can trickle down to all of these headsets. And I think one of these headsets is supposed to be $299 with inside out tracking. Now it is wired, and we don't know what the controllers are going to be. They'll probably start off with just using an Xbox controller, and you could play Vanishing of Ethan Carter and stuff like that. And all of that stuff will come to the Windows 10 store as well. But really what this is a battle, okay? Microsoft doesn't get any money from Steam selling all these games on Steam. They need something to counteract that. Same thing with Oculus. Oculus is Facebook. That's not them. They don't get any of that money. Microsoft has to create an ecosystem where they can get the money. And that's what this is all about. And, that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it does. Overall, I think that Microsoft do have a slant towards AR and mixed reality. They're calling it Windows mixed reality. So, there's a definite slant in that direction. And just going back to the last point, it's difficult for people to make the transition between what they're seeing with these VR headsets, which are being released later on this year, to how they're going to compete really in gaming terms with some of these other headsets. And one other thing I want to mention on this story as well is that Windows holographic, they have come out and said that it will not block the Vive or the Rift. So that's sort of reassuring. We will be able to get some kind of functionality on that with the headsets that are already out there. But Steve, what did you think about all of this?
Not too much that you guys haven't really already said. On that last point that they said that they will not block the Vive or the Rift, that just really reaffirms what Anthony said. Like, this isn't about really hardware specifically. This is about getting people to their store. And I find it interesting. Traditionally I'm more of a console gamer and haven't really been a PC gamer. And Xbox as a brand, they have their fans, and I have to assume they're doing relatively well within the space of selling games on that e-commerce system. But when it comes to the PC front, I have this feeling, and I don't really know any sort of number, so I may be talking out of my rear again. I have a feeling like no real gamer is super invested in the Microsoft store, you know, as their primary source of getting games. I feel like, you know, Steam is probably king, and you know, it can work in the case of Oculus somewhat because, you know, Oculus at the time was one of two headsets. But when we reach a point where we have 30 headsets by all these different makers, is Microsoft Store really going to be capable of, I don't know, being, you know, a true like major competitor? Or is their hardware going to have to somehow, you know, instead of them not blocking the Vive or the Rift, is the hardware that they are most associated with really going to, the biggest point is going to be whether or not they can play SteamVR games?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, nobody can really compete with Steam on that front, but it depends the route that Microsoft might be going for with all this, because it's so closely tied with. I mean, I don't even know really what Windows holographic is. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. I've not seen too much about it other than it mentioned constantly.
Hey, wait. One other quick little thing I want to mention. Okay, somebody got hands-on with that Acer headset, and I don't remember if it was Upload VR or who it was, but somebody got hands-on with it. And one thing that they mentioned, they were talking about the Windows holographic, and they said that they were in there and that they were like opening up different folders and stuff. And you're basically what it is they were talking about how when you put on your Vive and you're in SteamVR, there's a certain number of things you can do, but you can't do everything that you do on your headset. You can't open up chat. You got to take the headset off and go over to the computer. And this guy was talking about how Windows holographic, basically what they're doing with this is it's basically Windows 10, but for VR and AR. It's for HMDs, and it'll allow you to open up different. You don't have to take your headset off every time. You can open up a browser. You can be in a game. They were talking about this. You can be in a game and you can set over here like a Reddit page or something. Just have it sitting there in your little Windows world. I mean, in your VR world, but it's over there in the corner or what have you. And the guy was mentioning that when he got done doing it, it's like he was like, man, he's like, I don't want to go back to Vive and Oculus and not be able to do this. Now that I've done this, I feel like we're so handicapped by the Oculus store and by the Vive store of like, I can't access all this stuff, but with Windows holographic, I can, because it's allowing you to control your whole desktop and you know, messages and everything that could be in your VR world. So I just wanted to bring up that little point.
Yeah, no, that sounds very interesting to me, and that's what you hope it will be for Windows holographic when you hear this. But they've not made, I mean, this hands-on that you read about is interesting to read about, and I just can't wait. I know that they have to limit the amount of information that's out to the public, and they're going to announce this at some point within the next few months properly, where they'll give us some insight into exactly what you can do in Windows holographic, and that's really what I'm after, because from what you've just said, that is very, very interesting to me. Okay.
Oh, wait, one other quick little note is I didn't read this. I didn't look into this, but there was some message on the Vive subreddit or maybe virtual reality subreddit about some Windows 10 preview build number, blah, 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 where you can actually try you can try some basic things of Windows holographic right now.
Yeah, I did see that post as well. I don't know exactly how you get access to it, but I guess it's all detailed within that post anyway. So that'd be something good to try at some point. I don't want it to break my system. That's what I'm terrified of, though. If I try something like that, it might ruin everything. So maybe I won't. But moving on to the next news story coming out of GDC last week. And this was a big one, but this was sort of expected. I think a lot of people were thinking this would happen. And that was the announcement of the Nvidia GTX 1080 Ti. And some of the specs that were revealed on this are interesting. It's basically, they're saying it's 35% faster on average than a GTX 1080. And it also has a faster clock speed overall than a Nvidia Titan X Pascal. So that's the sort of top end card that was released a few months ago. So if you bought one of those, you might be a little bit annoyed. But also it should, I mean, because of this, it should outperform the Titan X in gaming as well. And the other thing I want to mention as well, because this is something that I've skipped over initially, but they did say that this card is actually going to include support for VR SLI, and this is something that people mention all the time. Can we run two graphics cards in tandem to increase the performance of the PC? And there's certain problems with that in VR that we all know about. So this seems to be the first mention that you can do that with a graphics card that's coming out. So that's cool to hear. But Steve, did you see this story, and what did you think? Will you be buying one?
Probably not. And it's nothing against the 1080 Ti. Like we have to continue to evolve, and this is what Nvidia does. They make chipsets, and they keep pushing the silicon space. That said, where VR currently sits right now, there's a lot of talk. We need the horsepower. We need the horsepower. We need the horsepower. It takes so much to run two 1080p screens at 90 frames per second, and that's all true. However, at the same time, I feel like there's so much lacking in the realm of optimization. There are some very simple games that you should be able to run 60 frames per second on a PS1 that, really shouldn't be struggling to hit 90 frames per second in two eyes, even with a 970, 960 and things like that, but they are. So I think it's important that we keep advancing. Nvidia is doing the right thing. But right now, I think if you could have 5 of these cards, some of these games are still going to run like crap. And I think we really got to focus there and get that up to speed to start really leveraging this increased power.
Definitely. I agree with you. I didn't think about that with this story, because I upgraded to a 1070 last year, just after getting VR. And it must have been just after, because I remember upgrading my card and thinking I'd see a huge difference in all of these games. I had a 970 and I moved up to a 1070, and there wasn't a huge difference. And the games I was getting problems in with the 970, they weren't. Again, it's optimization issues, as you say. It's not really the fact that the cards incapable. It seems to be down to the specific optimization of all these different titles. But Anthony, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this was huge for me because I am in a situation where I do have this 970, and it's always been said that the 970 is the base. That's the base level of VR. And so anybody that's developing a VR game, they should get it to be able to run on a 970, and maybe it performs better on a 1070 and 1080 and stuff like that, but it's got to run at that base 970 level. One thing that I've noticed, though, is the farther that we've gotten along in this VR thing, in the beginning, I could run every game, and every game was running fine, and everything was great. And I was like kind of happy by the fact that, I have this old crappy 970 and it's still basically putting along and doing its thing. But I've noticed more recently, there seem to be more games that are starting to come out now where it almost seems like if you have a 970, you're not quite cutting the mustard. And excuse me, but we have games like Soul Keeper VR and like this Mage thing and Arctica 1 and Lone Echo and all this stuff like this. And I can tell you right now that my 970, when some of these games start coming out that are a little bit more intense, I just think that the 970 isn't quite cutting it anymore, and I'm going to have to do something. I knew that this year probably was going to be my upgrade year, and do I build an entirely new PC, or do I just get one of these 1080 Ti's? The good news is the price. Everybody thought this 1080 Ti was going to be like $1,100, $1,200, $1,000. It's, I believe, $700, right? $699.99.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe it's around there. Yeah,
I remember seeing that too.
Yeah, it's $700, and then they dropped the price of the 1080 down to $500. in correlation with this, and I guess the 1070 probably dropped as well. But I was in this one NeoGAF thread where everybody was talking about this 1080 Ti, and it's funny because there were a lot of people in there that have 1080s, and they were like, "Oh shit, I got to sell my 1080. How much can I get for my 1080?" And this one guy was like, "How much can I get for my 1080 now?" Because they dropped the price of 1080s to 500. And this guy's like, "Well, a used 1080, you probably can only sell it for 400." And then a little light bulb went off in my head where it's like, do I just buy a used 1080 for in the 400-ish range? Or do I just freaking go whole hog and go with this 1080 Ti? And so, of course, we do have AMD. They have something called Vega. And a lot of people are wondering, is the low price of this 1080 Ti and lowering the 1080 to 500 and all of that, maybe this Vega is legit, and maybe Nvidia knows that this Vega is legit. And that's the other shoe that's going to drop. And then, of course, we have Ryzen, AMD's CPU that came out. It seems to be performing a little bit better, but the benchmarks are a little bit all over the place. So all of this stuff is up in the air. And I can say that myself personally, my God, think of how many little things I got to think about buying. There's the HTC Vive Deluxe audio strap. There's the tracker. Do I need to get a new 1080 Ti? Do I need to upgrade my PC? Should I get this LG headset? Should I get Project Alloy? Should I get an Acer headset? I mean, there's a million freaking things to think about. It's really making all this complicated because money doesn't grow on trees. We have to make educated decisions. There's only so much money we can dedicate to all this stuff, and we have to be careful about where we put our money at. And so right now, I'm just kind of sitting on the sidelines. But yeah, I absolutely have to upgrade my video card.
Yeah, with a lot of these graphics cards, like you say, Anthony, a lot of the baseline games really that they're aiming for a 970. So that's when we first got VR. I'm with you on your opinion that things have got steadily worse in terms of performance with these games, and I think that's because we've got so many indie games that are coming out. I'm not saying that the people that have developed these indie games are not talented, and they're very talented creating some of these games, but maybe they're not as adept at optimizing all of these games as some of the bigger studios. And there seemed to be a very, very big focus at the beginning that these games have to run at 90 frames per second with no dropped frames. And you look at games like Job Simulator and they run flawlessly on a 970. But with these graphics cards, one thing I want to say is as you go up the ranks of these graphics cards, I think really a majority of what you're getting is being taken up in the ability to super sample. And it's the fact that if you were to go for a 1080 or a 1080 Ti, you'll be able to super sample all of these games to a higher level and get a slightly clearer image. I think that's really the attraction of going for these higher cards, although in the future that could change. We don't know how well Fallout 4 VR is going to run on a 970 or the minimum specification for that game. So it could be very, very close to getting to the stage where 970 won't cut the mustard anymore. But yeah, in my eyes, I think as you go higher, you're able to super sample, and that's the main attraction really. Okay, moving on to the next story that we've got. This is one because we all knew that Robo Recall was coming, but we didn't know that it was going to be coming out this soon, and it was released last week. They just it was a surprise announcement that it was being released. So yeah, it was available on the Oculus store, and it was free for all Oculus Touch customers, and it was $30 for everybody else. And the other thing that was brought up last week at GDC around this game was the fact that it was going to support mods as well, and we're already seeing some of these mods coming out, so that was something that I wasn't expecting anyway. So I know that Steve, you've tried this game. Why don't you give us some of your initial thoughts on this?
I like it a lot. It's just fun. There's not much of a a narrative or whatever, but I think Epic has created something that runs really well, looks really good, and feels really good, and that's kind of an important thing, is that it feels good. And you know what I guess what I mean by that is that when you're doing all the little mechanics of the game, you know, it feels tangible, or it feels like, you know, it feels like it makes sense. So, you know, some of these things that we're describing is, you know, you can grab a robot, and, you know, every robot kind of has each leg and its head and its torso, and it all has kind of tethered anchor points. You can grab them, you know, grab one hand in your left hand by the torso, and in your right hand grab his head and just yank his head off. And, you know, everyone saw that in the, you know, the trailers and the announcement of the game. But then, you know, what I wasn't really prepared for is you can then do stuff like, you know, that torso that you're, you know, this beheaded robot that you have hanging in your left hand, well, you can now use him as a shield, and you could take his head and throw it at something else. And, you know, it's just anything you kind of comes to your mind to do, you can, for the most part, you can do it. And I thought that was really, really cool. You know, you can, you know, the bullets fire real slow, and you can, you know, in the vein of Matrix or something, you can kind of grab the bullet and throw it back at them. And you know, it's just real clever, and it's real arcadey, and it's done in a way where you can kind of pick up and play, which I think suits the game reasonably well. The loading times could stand to be a little quicker, but you can pick the game up, play for 15-20 minutes, go through a level or two, and just set it down. You know, it doesn't require this big investment. So I think they hit probably all their targets. And for me, you know, the $30 cost is justified. I don't think it's going to be too terribly long in the terms of value, but in the terms of what it means in the VR space, this is one of the better games, I think, to come out. It's kind of there with Super Hot and Arizona Sunshine, and a lot of the games that we were really fond with. This Robo Recall belongs in that discussion with all of them.
Yeah, it's a lot more arcadey, because I've only played the sort of the very first level, the introduction, really, the tutorial type level, and also the level after that. So I'm very early on in this game at the moment, but it's a lot more arcadey than I thought it was going to be. You know, you're shooting all these robots and all these drones and things that are flying around you, and you've got all these scores popping out of them and giving you multipliers, bonuses, and all these other things. You've got I didn't know it was going to be like that, but I think it's great. And although you could say it's a wave shooter, it's sort of moving on from that. You know, we categorize a lot of these titles that are coming out as being just another wave shooter. Well, this is sort of a wave shooter, but it's taking it to the next level. And it's you've got all these explosions going on all around you. And it reminds me a lot of these, I said it's arcadey, you know, it reminds me a lot of these sort of early to mid 90s arcade games that were going all out to just attract the public. You've got all these things, all these explosions going off all the time. The graphics are just really in your face, and this is that game. This is what it is. Really, really good. Now, I'll point out, because we're playing on a HTC Vive through Revive, so we're not playing it in the way it was supposed to be played in an Oculus Rift. And there's certain problems that arise by doing that. It works pretty well for the most part, but there is a problem with using the touchpad to teleport. I find it's because you're supposed to be doing this with an analog stick, and I can imagine it works flawlessly with an analog stick, but with a touchpad, it can be a little bit finicky and a little bit slow to move around the levels to get it exactly right. Because the way this game works, you pick a spot to teleport into by pushing very slowly forward on the touchpad, and then you'll get the highlighted area as you would expect in a lot of these games. But then you have to rotate the touchpad around to make sure you're facing in the right direction to combat anything that's coming towards you. The problem comes because at the moment it's not really a 360 game. If you turn away from your standard orientation of facing forwards, you'll get a message that will tell you to turn around and make sure you're facing towards the sensors, obviously being designed for a 180-degree 2-sensor setup for the Oculus Rift. So it's got these problems, although I think the developers have come out and said that there'll be a patch within the next month to sort this problem out and make it true 360. So as a downside at the moment for me, the way I'm playing it on the HTC Vive, this is sort of the main thing that I don't like about the game. Having said that, I can easily get past it and just enjoy it for what it is at the moment.
Yeah, I think even a lot of the Oculus owners aren't really super happy with that teleport, because assuming you do have, you know, kind of, you can visualize having the thumbstick, and you know, it still takes a long time, I would imagine, to be able to go where you want. It's not where you can teleport quickly and kind of hop around in the vein of well, even Arizona Sunshine. So I think them changing that, you know, is going to be big for, you know, especially for Vive owners, but for Oculus owners as well. One thing, and I do have a Let's Play of this game up. One thing I learned, that when you go to teleport, if you almost visualize that you have a thumbstick on your touchpad of your Vive controller, you can kind of do that motion and get it to be more repeatable and have less problems with it. The issue that I still have is still very slow. Like, if I decide I want to go over there in front of that car, it's, you know, 2 seconds by the time I go through all the motions and get it pointed and get over there. And that is a little bit game breaking. And, you know, everything Gary said, how it's, you know, kind of 180 if you turn around. It's not a 180 game though. Like, I found having to turn around, like, there's crap coming from behind you. It's not like I don't know, like Space Pirate Trainer or something where the bulk of the bad guys that you have to address are all coming from in front of you. I think it's mostly them coming in front of you, but there is stuff happening behind you. You know, so you do need to turn around. It's just the mechanic that they give you to turn around isn't perfectly natural. Now with a Vive, you can just turn around and it'll work just fine. The problem is you then have this pop-up, this overlay that says turn around, and it's kind of like just staring at you. And I found that I got used to just like sort of ignoring it. And go ahead, Gary, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because just close to that point as well, where you get this prompt to say turn back around and face the sensors. You also get a prompt where, because teleporting is such a hassle really at the moment, you get a prompt saying you need to move around the level, you need to keep moving, and you just think, I really don't want to. I just want to stand here and take them on here, but it's constantly telling you to move around as well.
So I think, you know, Epic, they know what they're doing. You know, for whatever reasons, they release it in the way that it is, and they've heard the public outcry. I think they'll get it right. You know, I sort of trust them. And the mods, like, if you are a person that doesn't mind, you know, tinkering with mods or just running mods that the community has addressed, this has already been fixed. There's full walking mods where you can just touch the touchpad and walk around via the dubbed onward style locomotion. They've taken the turnaround message, they've taken it out of the game. So all this is addressed if you want to play the modded version. The downside, and I haven't seen any concrete, point by point, it's believed that there are some differences between the call it the retail version and the mod version. We don't know, is it missing some levels? Is it, missing part of the thing? Is it missing some of the cutscenes, like what's at the beginning of the game? I don't really know what's different, but you can try the mod version. In fact, you don't even have to buy it. You can try the mod version for free. I haven't tried it because, I bought it, but so that is an option. And I would say if you're not going to buy it from Oculus, if you have a Vive and you've said, I'm not going to support their closed market or whatever, that it's worth at least exploring the mod version and giving this game a go, because it is really well done.
Yeah. Anthony, I know you've not had a chance to try this game yet, but I just wondered if you got any thoughts on Robo Recall, about the release and just the reception it's received.
Yeah, so it's funny because I was probably the most hyped for this game out of all three of us, before it came out. And the surprise launch caught me off guard because I'm actually kind of remodeling some stuff in this room here where I play my Vive. This is my Vive area, like over here, right? And you can't see it in the camera shot here, but I've got stuff all over the place over there. And this game just caught me off guard. And it's like, oh man, when I found out about it, I'm like thinking, oh, do I just move all this stuff out of the way just so I can quickly try some Robo Recall? And then I was like, let me just finish what I'm doing here. It's almost going to be done. I'll be able to play Robo Recall actually tonight. I should be able to play it tonight. So I just haven't had a chance to play it. But the only thing I'm curious about is I've heard people say this, that, and I saw it in Steve's Let's Play to a degree. I only watched like 10 seconds of his Let's Play because I kind of want to, you know, experience the game for myself. But I saw Steve, you know, doing all this stuff, and I heard that this is kind of like an exercise game. Like you can kind of get a workout while you're playing this thing. I was just wondering if you guys wanted to comment on that at all.
I could see it a little bit, but I have Knockout League, and they're like, there's no exercise like Knockout League. So I didn't notice it because, you know, it didn't make me sweat in 2.5 seconds like that game does, but I could see it.
I also heard a lot of people compare it to Super Hot in certain ways.
Yeah, I don't get that comparison really. I mean, you've got the part where as the bullets get close to you, you know, you've played Bullet Train, and it's the same kind of thing really. As the bullets get close to you, they slow down and you can grab them out of the air and then throw them back. It's got a few small similarities, I suppose, but for me, I didn't really see a lot of especially, I mean, the gameplay for me is nothing like Super Hot. Super Hot is its own thing as far as I'm concerned, and this is sort of scratching a different itch.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gary. It doesn't, outside of being a sort of a first perspective unique take on a shooter, outside of that, it really doesn't have anything in comparison to Super Hot, at least.
What about the I mean, one of the things I thought about this game is this is Epic Games. You know, this is Epic Games. They were given $10 million by Oculus. Now, I know they took a small little team to develop this game, but still, it's Epic. They have the Unreal Engine. This is their first VR game from them that's running on this engine. Do you guys feel like it has some AAA-ish feel to it? Or, I mean, were you a little disappointed? Like, were you expecting it to be a little bit more AAA or what?
The only thing I've personally been disappointed with is the teleport. I think it feels like the mechanic and the feel, it feels very AAA. What I think it's missing is, I'm assuming, I haven't completed it, but I'm assuming it's a relatively short campaign. You know, it's not going to feel like as fully, you know, in terms, not only in just in terms of time, but in terms of, you know, beginning and end. I don't think it's going to feel like a, you know, a Call of Duty or Battlefield or something in that vein. It will feel like a, you know, a $30 title in that sense, but it feels complete. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel early access. It doesn't feel like they took really any shortcuts. And in fact, you know, just in terms of progressing through the game, Gary and I were talking earlier, one of the biggest problems I have is that I find myself just wanting to do stuff, and it ends up me getting in me dying. Like, I will, you know, say, hey, it's been a while since I've grabbed a robot and tore his head off, so I'm gonna sit, and instead of shooting this robot, I'm gonna wait for him to get closer so that I can do something different, and then I end up dying in the process. So I think it's a good game, and I think most people should be relatively excited for it.
How's the comedy and like the sound effects and stuff? Because in the trailer, like when I first saw the trailer, I was like, oh man, this is cool. You know, it's got a comedy bent, and Gary mentioned that it kind of reminds him of like arcade games from the 90s. And I heard somebody else mention this is kind of like a Sega arcade game that's been taken to VR. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, sound effects and like the comedy level and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely got some comedy aspects to it. You know, you've got this well, I won't give anything away because it's part of the story really of what's going on, but you do have somebody talking to you, a few people talking to you, and they say things, you know, I guess, because I mean, we've mentioned this before, but I've not played through Portal, but I have seen some videos of it, and I've sort of got the comedy aspect of that, and this probably is aiming towards that kind of level really in places. I think it works well. And just going back to the point of the AAA game, this is absolutely, I think it feels absolutely great. The graphics are superb in this game. They've done a great job, and it's just a good, very well polished game.
Yeah, it'll be hard for anyone, in my opinion, to kind of top Portal, because Portal just kind of created its own comedy category, sort of, you know, at least within gaming. But it does borrow on that, and a lot of it I think stems from anytime you have a robot or a computerized digital being that's attempting to be funny, it'll always be compared to Portal. Headmaster, you know, has something similar going on, and you know, on the PlayStation VR, where it's computerized sentient being that's attempting to be funny. This game does that too. Like a lot of times, like the robots, I won't spoil anything like Gary mentioned, but the robots, you know, you're getting shot at, you'll hear them say stuff like, "I'm gonna get him," like, you know, like, "I'm gonna be the one that takes him down," and it's stuff in that vein. So they're attempting, and I haven't heard a lot of repetitiveness, you know, at least I haven't noticed. So take that for what it is.
Yeah. Okay, so we've been going for a while here. We can cover one more quick story. Steve, I know you wanted to just mention briefly this news about the PlayStation VR and some of the upcoming titles.
So, you know, it's kind of buried in a sea of more important detailed announcements, but it wasn't that long ago when, you know, we were all staring at the Armageddon. You know, Sony had just laid off or cut ties with Gorilla Cambridge, and you know, every thread on PSVR subreddit was, "There are no games, this is Vita 2.0," and all that. So I guess Sony felt compelled to say something during this week when everyone else was saying great things, and they just come out and said that we have 220 games and apps in development, and that more than 100 of them are coming this year. You know, we don't really know any details. They haven't, you know, made any additional announcements in terms of you know, any specific titles that I'm aware of, but they felt compelled to come out and say, "No, this is being supported. We have a truckload of things in development. I'm sure a lot of them are small, more indie-ish style things, and less of them are, you know, Resident Evil 7 and Farpoint, but still 200 titles. That is a lot of bite-sized, fun-sized Snickers. And, you know, if that's how we got to feast in VR, at least we know we're going to be able to do that, at least on the PlayStation VR, for quite a while."
Yeah, like you say, this got a little bit buried under all the other news that was coming out, but I think it's just something to mention, because we all want more content. This is the thing. Anybody in VR can tell you, we get a lot of content. Content is coming out all the time, but it's very limited, it's very short, so we're constantly after that next thing, and this is just good to hear, I think, overall. Anthony, I know you saw this news story. Is there anything else that you want to add onto that?
I'm just wondering, well, we know we have Farpoint coming in May, but I have no idea if there's anything coming in April, you know, or before Farpoint. So we might be in a little bit of a semi-drought season right now with PSVR. From basically, you had Resident Evil 7, you had Dirt Rally, those were the big ones. The next big one appears to be Farpoint in May, and then but in between that Dirt Rally and in between Farpoint, all we're going to basically get is a bunch of little snackables like the Rhombus of Ruin and all of that type of stuff.
Well, I don't know where Starblood Arena fits exactly. I view it as being, at least my impression is that it's kind of somewhere between the snackables and the you know, the big entree that Resident Evil 7 is. So Starblood Arena, did I say Starpoint? Starblood Arena, I think, is the name of the game. It's going to get a retail package. I noticed it on GameFly, so you'll be able to grab it from there. So that signals to me that it maybe is a title it's in the kind of the $35 to $40-ish price point. It's probably a little deeper in its level of development, and what I mean by that, and you know, not so indie, not so amateur. You know, maybe they have better character models, maybe have better sound effects, and you know, better graphics in general. So there's that title, and I believe it comes out second week of April or something like that.
But if you don't care about multiplayer, it's like that one doesn't really mean anything, you know. And so the other thing too is, I do believe at E3, I believe, because this PSVR has been selling well enough and the momentum is there, I believe Sony's going to be announcing a lot of PSVR stuff. There's going to be some big stuff. There's going to be some games we could hang our hats on, like Farpoint, some big ones. But the thing is is like, how quickly will those come? So I kind of feel like with PSVR, I hope people are willing to kind of weather the storm of a little bit of a drought from the stamp. It's going to be kind of like being early on a Nintendo platform, where if you're early on a Nintendo platform, you kind of get like one game a month, you know what I mean? And so it's like, there's kind of like one big game a month, and you better hope that that big game is in your wheelhouse, because you're basically going to get one big game and then maybe a bunch of little indie games to kind of sprinkle around it. I'm sure the fall is going to be awesome, because I'm sure they'll probably have some big VR games that have been completely hidden and secret. We don't know anything about them, and some of them are going to come out this fall. But I do kind of wonder if it's going to be a little bit of a drought season, kind of, you know, from here till fall, basically.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Do either of you have anything else you want to mention on this show?
Nah, that's pretty much it for me. I didn't get a chance to play very much this week. I did play some Battlezone, and I will have a Let's Play coming for that. But that's basically it. Just super busy, but I'm finally going to be able to get back to playing more games and stuff.
Steve?
Nope, I don't have anything else to add other than thanks for watching, and make sure you leave us reviews on iTunes. You know, everyone's got to do the housekeeping and the request for reviews, and you know, we're no different. It helps us get visibility, which, you know, honestly motivates us to keep coming back. So please review us. Yeah, absolutely. That'd do us a bigger favor than it probably seems like it would. So yeah, if you can leave a comment or a review or anything like that, it'd be great. But anyway, that's probably the end of this show. So that was VR Roundtable episode 25. Thanks for watching, everybody. And again, feel free to send us an email at vrroundtable@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Twitter, VR_roundtable. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I guess we'll see you next time.
Take it easy.